Yeah, so just thank you so much for joining us. Let's see. I don't know why it's acting that way. Okay, anyways, so thank you so much for joining us. Truly appreciate your time and just your wisdom and knowledge like coming here. Um, so for those who do not know, um, Cheryl Aguilar is a bilingual social worker and public relations consultant committed to advancing rights and opportunities for low income people, people of color, and immigrants. She's a founder and director of the Hope Center for Wellness in Washington, D.C., doctoral candidate for social work at Smith University, and a research fellow with the Health Policy Reform Scholar Program of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. So it's really great having you here at Chris Advocacy Day. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this conversation.
Yeah. So yeah, can you I guess what I've been asking people today is like, can you tell us a little more about yourself, your background, but also, what ice cream flavor would describe your current day, or like how you feel about social work and capital
Ooh,
policy.
I never got in that question. That's a great question. Ooh. I'll start with that because that sounds quite fun. Huh? What ice cream flavor? Um, that's a good one. You know what I think about, it's I don't know if this is a flavor, but I think about the sprinkles when you have the vanilla ice cream and you have like little sprinkles on top and all the colors and the rainbow. Because I think in terms of social work, we can do so many different things and we can wear so many different hats and help so many different people. So I think the colors of the sprinkles to me represent the diversity of our profession and the diversity of the communities that we serve.
That's awesome. Yeah.
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 And then I know we talked a little bit before it started, but if you could repeat yourself, that'd be great. About yourself and your work.
Yeah, yeah. So I am based out of Washington, D.C. I am sometimes I refer myself as a clinical social worker, and that's typically when I want to tell people what my focus of social work is. But it's really, and then when I'm in a crowd with other social workers who are macro, who are interested in macro, then I'm like, but I also do macro. And I think just as a social worker, we can do so many different things. I have a private practice in DC, and it's a community based mental health practice. And the emphasis on community is really important because I think there's an idea sometimes that private practices are just for the elite and just for certain communities. And there's more of a movement to create community based private practices where we can help people from all walks of life. So that's kind of what my practice is. I've been a social worker since 2014. This is like my third career, and hopefully, well, we'll see if it's the last. Every next decade brings me to the next thing that makes my heart sing. But I transitioned from public relations and advocacy and community organizing into becoming a social worker. I went back to school in 2012, and then 2014 I graduated. So since then, I've been practicing either at local agencies here in the DC metro area or through my practice. And I've had my practice since 2017. I work with people from all walks of life, and but I specialize in working with immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers.
Mhm.
So it's a little snapshot of what I do. And in my practice, I'm really lucky both in my practice through work, but also in like my personal life. I get to do a little bit of micro, macro, and mezzo through my work. So I coordinate groups, and then I really try to engage on macro work, because one of the things that we know that I've seen with my clients is that their well-being may be connected to environmental issues and issues like, for instance, immigration. So what's happening externally really impacts how we feel internally. So that's why I aim to combine all three different areas of social work.
Great. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And then just for everyone else, what kind of like demographics or population of immigrants do you mainly work with? Like Central America, Latin America, like East Europe, like, or just like, I guess the type and maybe the types of like people that you work with or kids that you work with?
Yeah. I think it depends on what's happening in the world and who my clients are. But right now, I'm currently working with a lot of people from Central America, especially, my practice is one of the practices that is providing mental health services and kind of community and case management support to Central Americans family who were separated and later unified and were separated under the Trump's zero tolerance policy. So families who endure a lot of trauma and who parents who were detained and children who remain at shelters and eventually came together. So right now, my current work includes working very closely with Central American communities.
Okay, great. Um, and what kind of brought you to your current role? Like, what was like trajectory? Was it like personal, professional development? Like, what made you want to step into this role?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I see Emily, I just want to say that I see you, I see your question, and I will get to that question next. Um, it's funny because I used to say that I stumble upon social work and mental health by error, but that this never really happens like that. I feel like uh, one opportunity leads you to the next. But I was working in 2011 as a mental health as a PR consultant on a mental health project, and that project had to do actually with advocacy. We were looking to advocate for more mental health services in one of our local communities in Maryland, more mental health services for young people impacted by mental health, young immigrants. And part of that role focused on helping the youth tell their stories before elected officials and the media. And through that work, I got to learn a lot about the mental health challenges that impact young people and also the barriers that keep them from finding services or finding someone in their language or who's cultural competent. So around that time, I decided to you know uh, figure out how can I be a part of that solution. And that was really truly inspired by one of the youth that I was working with, who, in this role, they began to tell me everything about their life. And one of these youth shared with me his suicidal ideation. And I remember back then I had no mental health background. I mean, all all the only thing I knew about mental health was my own experience in mental health as a client, not a therapist. And I remember looking at this youth and feeling frazzled because I didn't even know where to begin to help them. And I went ahead and took them to their counselor. And I said, I'll take you to talk to a counselor because I knew enough to connect them to resources. And this youth looked at me really puzzled and looked at me directly into my eyes and said, "But I want you to help me. Do you know how hard it is for me to be able to open up about this?" So he went to his counselor, but I went home wondering how he was and keeping him in my mind and heart. And eventually I decided, well, if we're seeking to advocate for more mental health services that are multicultural and cultural competent, maybe I can be a part of that solution. And that's what led me to pursue my MSW in social work. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think all of us are inspired by something like to get into this helping profession. So
Yeah.
it's really refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
Also, if any of you all like have questions, put in the Q&A tab, and we'll make sure to try to get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so um, what are the most like common tasks or responsibilities you have in your advocacy work, or just like you know, kind of like just um, how your work is really impactful?
Yeah, and I'm gonna answer that question along with I'm gonna see if I can start with Emily's question and then I'll kind of weave
Yeah,
in both. Um, this question is how would you advise us starting out in workforce to find these opportunities and work in these spaces?
yeah,
Then related to marketing yourself, and then I'll kind of weave in your question. I would say one place to begin is having an internship. If you are a clinical orientation, you must have an internship. I think that may be the case for macro orientations or for other orientations. So like finding an internship at a place that aligns with what you want to do is a first step, because then you start making a lot of connections. with people. And I remember someone told me this once, and I remember this advice I did not like. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell people to say that, to do that. Someone, I remember when I was graduated, someone said, just take whatever job, even if it doesn't pay well. Just take whatever job it doesn't pay well. Actually, there are, one of the misconceptions about social work is that you are not going to get paid enough money. Some jobs are low pay, but there's some jobs that are paid, not kind of decently based on your market. So I would say try to find that job, and look to really promote your assets. If you're bilingual, if you have particular experience with a community, working with a community, if you have a particular experience, like I did not have experience with social work, but I had experience in public relations. And sometimes those skills can be used in the social work profession as well. So your life doesn't begin when we become social work students. We have experiences from before, and it's important to incorporate that. And I would say find, I am a member of many social work organizations. Like I'm a member of CRISP, I'm a member of NASW, I'm a member of clinical organizations, social work clinical organizations. So I think, and when you're a student, you get the student discount, which is even better. So become a member, go to those events, network as much as possible. If you are someone who doesn't really like being, in a social sphere, and networking doesn't come easy, and you prefer one-on-one, then have one-on-ones. I get many requests, and I used to do this too, and I still do. If there's someone who does similar work that I want to do, or someone that I admire, I may reach out to them and say, hey, like, I would love to maybe go out for coffee or lunch or whatever, and hear a little bit more about your work, and maybe get some ideas as to how I can get into a similar job. So, like, figure out who you know, or figure out who your friends know. That's a great start. But going to conferences too. Many of the social work conferences, when they're in person or even now by video, have volunteer slots, and you can attend for free as a volunteer if you do certain tasks, and then you get to meet a lot of people. So that would be one way to kind of find, to see what's out there. And so let me know, Emily, if that answers some of your questions, and we'll talk more about other ideas. And in terms of what I do, so my main role right now in my practice is as director. So I get to create and design our programs, whether that's our therapeutic work, whether that is community programs. So, for instance, we have art-based groups at a high school and at a detention center. We have community wellness workshops for the community. So I get to direct, implement, and design some of that. So that's more like, I would say, connected to clinical, and a little bit of macro, that kind of designing and coming out to the community is a little bit of mezzo. And in terms of the macro, that's something I do more kind of like, it's my passion kind of work, and I do it more as a volunteer basis. But for instance, one of the things that working in immigration, I felt lonely initially as a social worker, working with the community I was working with, and I knew, I knew for sure that there was other social workers out there who cared about immigration. I remember going to a rally here in DC, an immigration rally, and wondering, I wonder how many other social workers are in this rally, because we are really good at supporting community causes and community issues, but sometimes we don't do it under the social work umbrella. So we may not be out there with signs saying, I'm a social worker who supports comprehensive immigration reform. We may just be out there without identifying ourselves as social workers. So I wanted to know where other social workers were. And along with other colleagues, we created something we call the Social Workers United for Immigration Network, which began as just having some meetings with different people, with 6 people who cared about immigration. And then we eventually have more meetings. And now we're like a listserv of about 100 people in which we share resources around immigration, whether it is advocacy opportunities, whether it's resources for our clients. So that's pretty much what I do, kind of like on the downside, Uh, and So part of my role in that is to be able to bring other people to the network, and being able to cultivate and foster opportunities for us to engage in advocacy regarding immigration.
That's amazing. And I think just like the power of like networking, but
Mhm.
also like vulnerability and like just personal insight or lived experiences along with professional experience internships, really do impact the trajectory of where it's gotten you now. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
Um, I would say what I think was like one of your challenges you kind of faced entering or just initially or even that you have now still?
Mhm. In general, or in like in the profession?
Either or, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Oh, sure, sure. Um, I think in general, in terms of the clinical work that I do, or just the helping community members work, is that there's a lot of work to go around. There's, is as a provider, we have a lot of demand for services and sometimes not enough people to do the work. So you can get into, if you're not careful with your boundaries and you're not careful with really knowing your limits, um, you can do a lot more work than you have the bandwidth for, and that can lead to burnout. So I think the hardest part has been being able to balance the passion and desire to help the community, and setting boundaries for myself, and to not overextending myself. And I think that's continuous work. Like, that's not something that I feel like have ever arrived, because I think that's evolving. Like, I always have to kind of check in with myself to see how much can I do. If I say yes to this new project, what am I saying no to for myself? So asking myself those questions regarding capacity, but mostly bandwidth and emotional bandwidth. um that's, I think, one of the main challenges I experience. I think something that is also very difficult, that is related to advocacy, is that, we know that as social workers, we learn that the environmental, what happens environmentally impacts the well-being of our clients. So I think sometimes it's really frustrating, and this is why we take our frustration and anger to mobilize for change. It could be really frustrating to see that a client's depression or client's anxiety is directly connected to lack of, for instance, immigration reform, or not enough affordable housing, of lack of affordable food on their tables. So I think sometimes seeing how our systems fail our community members, it's one of the biggest challenges. But it's also an opportunity, because as social workers, we have information that other people may not have. We have the opportunity to come locally to our elected officials to advocate. For instance, a few years back, I don't remember what year it was, when DC was looking to become a sanctuary city. I work with children, with children and parents who with undocumented statuses, and I was able to go and testify before our council members, what about their trauma and about their challenges being undocumented, and why it was important to have our city as a sanctuary city. So we have the stories, we have the knowledge, and we're able to ethically, while protecting clients' information or community members' information, advocate for change. So it's a matter of looking at the challenges, but also looking at how do we turn them into opportunities.
Yeah, and I think like just what you said, like compassionate fatigue is real and like
Yeah.
knowing your limits and boundaries about, what is what the job of a social worker can be.
Mhm.
And just even like hearing people's like testimonies and like seeing like their lived experiences be like knowledge and being like power that could really like shape and form politics and policies in place
Absolutely.
is really special.
Right.
um yeah, and I want to ask the audience actually, once you think about how you would respond to the situation if you were in Mrs. Aguilar's position, um, and what goals or different options or opportunities you would face if regarding passion fatigue or like trying to change policies that have failed people in the system. So if people want to, you know, add that in the chat or maybe like come on mic, you can feel free to do that. And I know we're a small group, so everyone can get a turn. Oh, you're on mute. Dr. Aguilar or Cheryl Aguilar, you're on mute right now. Oh, the mute button is the little microphone right by the C. There you go. Let's see. Julia, would you like to start with the question either in the chat or on the mic? Let's see. She's not responding. What about Melissa? Melissa, do you have a question? Oh, not yet. Thinking, listening. Okay. It's all right. It's all right if no one has questions about this, but I guess if you want to get a little creative, what would you? Oh, Cheryl, I can't hear you for some reason. Is anyone else having this issue? Yes, yeah. Can you try to do the mute on and off again real quick? Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, maybe come back. Hello? Still can't hear you, unfortunately. Let's see. Hello? Okay, let me get the tech Vincent to come up here real quick. Okay, Vincent's on the call. Vincent, do you know why your mic went out? Okay, he's working on it. That's very weird. Sorry about that. Okay, so Vincent is our tech guy, so he's gonna try to help you out.
Hi.
Hi, we're having an issue with Cheryl Aguilar's mic.
Was she talking fine just a moment and then it went out?
Yeah.
Cheryl, and you didn't click any buttons, I imagine.
No?
I imagine, because we can all hear each other. I imagine it's on your computer. I think you can still hear us. Oh, you just tried to mute it. I saw that. No, we can't hear you. Can you leave the session and come back, maybe? So sorry, everyone. We haven't had that issue before. I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, did she just try to be joined?
Yeah, she's trying.
Okay.
Hello.
All right, we can hear you. I'm heading out.
Okay, great. So it might have been on my end.
No worries.
Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us. Well, then, so technology is great because it has allowed us to connect until it fails, whether because externally or because something happened. Great.
Yeah. So I think the question we were on was like, in a perfect world, like, how would you imagine your field or like your scope of practice to thrive, basically, or like what's one thing you would want to see change in policy in your job or even in like just in the world in general?
Yes. Oh, I love that question. If all my dreams can become true, one would be that everyone has connection to a therapist, and then we treat mental health like we treat our overall health. That we understand that there's no health without mental health. And I always, my dream is like, just like we have primary care doctors, that we have a connection with a therapist at any given point in our life. That would be one thing. My other dream would be that if that dream does become true, that everyone would like to have therapies, that people have access to mental health services. For instance, many immigrants who are undocumented could have Medicaid based on the states that they're in, but the Medicaid does not include mental health. So there's a huge disparity there in terms of well-being services for certain communities. I would love to see comprehensive immigration reform pass in the next decade or way before, so no families have to endure what many immigrants endure. And something that is happening right now, I think it's important for us to pay attention to. Sometimes we may have administrations that we may experience as friendlier than the last administration. What they tend to do, similar policies may be kind of disguised in a better way. Something to look out for right now is the asylum ban that this new administration, the Biden administration, wants to pass. And that's an opportunity for us to take action, because there's a open comment period up until the end of March. And we're going to share the link for that. So sometimes when we have an administration that may feel like it's more aligned to our values, we may stop paying attention to what they're doing. But they may be doing things that can still harm our community. So it's even more important to be vigilant whenever we have a transition. So I think in terms of dreams, or if things could become true, I would really love to see more equity when it comes to access to health, when it comes to access to housing, when it comes to access to food, and other insecurities that our community members experience.
That's really awesome. And I know you're bilingual. I imagine you use Spanish in your practice. Just what does that look like to expand like other languages or heart languages like to your clients and to the kids you work with? And like how has that made a difference in your practice?
Yeah, language, the more I learn about language, the more fascinated I am. And one of the things that we know, or we're learning about language, is how certain emotions and certain traumatic experiences or certain experiences are located in language. So sometimes we say, oh, go speak to someone in therapy in your language, but we don't really know the why. But there's ways in which clients can process their experiences differently than when they may speak a foreign language or a other new language. So language plays a huge role in mental health, and also how people feel a sense of belonging and community. Somebody mentioned, I'm borrowing from what somebody else said. Somebody earlier put the two words belonging and community. So I think language has huge implications in terms of how people feel connected, in terms of how people feel like they're a part of something larger, they're a part of this community. And it's important to know our resources that are language driven in our community. If we are not the ones who speak another language, there's many opportunities out there, many organizations out there that may have those services. And I know that off line before we joined in, you mentioned language equity and language access. Everyone should be able to have an appointment with their provider in their preferable language. So that's something to also pay attention in whichever state or jurisdiction you may be in. What are the language access services available for our community?
Yeah, just because even when I was in New York during the pandemic, like the amount of information like was changing every day and dominantly in English. So even like try it Mandarin or Cantonese or like Urdu or other languages, Spanish, like I think really made a difference in like because knowledge is power. So even just like that, like empowering our clients to speak their truth has been really powerful. Yeah, and so I think you know, let's see, we're in the halfway mark, so I wanted to like just give space if people want to ask questions or just comments or anything for a speaker. If not, I have other questions I can ask forever because I'm personally interested in your work and immigration, and so I think it's really cool. Like you really are like an inspiration to like young social workers and stuff. Um,
Thank you.
so anyone have any questions or feedback? Let's see. Oh, that was cute. Melissa said your work is amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you. And if you're still in, I think we're a group of students here. I'm also a student. I'm now pursuing my doctoral degree at Smith College School for Social Work. And so I consider myself, being in this community of students right now. I know the struggle is real for sure. And there's so much that we can do. I feel like when we are going to school, at least my experience was I had so much on my plate. I had my job, I had my internship, I had school, and I couldn't wait to get out. And yes, I think there's that yearning to be done, but there's also many things that I wish I had done more of when I was in school, like connecting to our groups at school, connecting to social justice, more kind of social justice or social oriented opportunities at school. So figuring out, you're going to be done with your journey pretty soon or someday, but what are the things that you don't want to miss out on, that you can do right now and then you can carry on into the future as well.
Yeah, I mean, even like just networking today, like with all your peers, mentors, like other people with a similar mindset is huge. So I'm gonna ask if you have a LinkedIn. You don't mind sharing that one towards the end of this. But yeah, I think it's like, in numbers you have power. And I think it's like in shared experiences as like social workers in the profession, whether it's micro, macro, meso, like there's a shared community as well, which I think not many students like tap into.
And don't be like not assuming that you'll be afraid, but don't be afraid. And that's just a phrase. I think you're fearless. And everyone who's in this room, I'm sure is very fearless. And what's the other one? Fierce.
Fierce.
My bilingual brain sometimes tricks me and it doesn't know what language it's speaking. Uh, um, but don't be afraid to reach out to people. I love connecting with people, and I've written recommendation letters for people that I know. I do that all the time, and I love it. I have forwarded resumes to people that I know, and I every time there's someone who reaches out to me, I try to tend to that request because other people have done it for me. So anybody who you're listening from during this, conferences, and if there's anything interested that they said, follow up. We love being able to connect with people to resources because we've been there before, and it's a way to pass it forward. I'm wondering if anybody in this space is thinking about potentially going into the immigration space or into the advocacy space, and if you have some questions or wonderings about that.
Let's see. I'm just gonna pick on the people here. Hillary, do you have any desire to like do immigration or clinical work? Okay, she's trying to get her audio sorted. Let's see. Okay. Hello. Let's see. Okay, there you go. I can't hear you though. Can you try to get mute and unmute real quick? No. Okay, you're going to type it. But it's good to see you on screen.
But I would say as we're kind of figuring out the tech part, I'm going to share some resources. I wonder if I share on the chat. I'll share on the chat because I think that's what we can share it.
Yeah, just make sure it's called the session tab. So it's like on the right side says event, my agenda, and session. So just make sure it's in the session one so everyone here can access it.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Okay. I shared this somewhere else.
It's okay.
Right, I'm not sure. I shared that on something that says session.
Okay, session.
I think one great place to start is by volunteering. Like if you want to get into the immigration space or the advocacy space, there's many volunteering opportunities, so maybe even internship opportunities, and there could be also some paid opportunities as well. So if you were kind of on the fence about or want to learn how a particular field operates, I would say look at the different immigration organizations, and I included a whole bunch of them on that Google list that I shared, and also the action alert for the asylum ban that I mentioned. So you can learn a little bit about it and take action if take action to ensure that families that are coming now, asylum seeking families, are not separated from their families, or children are not detained as part of the ban suggests.
Yeah. Well, Hillary put her question in the chat. It says, what are some ways to start engaging my social network with immigration advocacy spaces? I'm the only social worker in my group who seems to have the lone voice. Good question.
Yeah. And let me see. So how do you engage people in your network? I'm all about having conversations. I'm all about one opportunity is seeing what's happening in the world, seeing what's happening in the here and now, like looking at the news and maybe engaging in conversations about it. I liked to approach conversations from a point of curiosity, knowing, kind of understanding where a certain idea came from, and understanding the person's stance on something. And then I may introduce my ideas, and I love sharing stories, because stories, while keeping information private and confidential, not just about my client, not about my clients, but stories that I know, and because I believe the stories change hearts and minds. So sometimes we focus on maybe statistics about a certain issue, but what really moves people are the stories of everyday people, and that helps change hearts and minds. So if there's something that you feel like you want to engage people that you know about a particular issue, I will start by asking questions, and I also ask permission to share more information, because what happens is that in conversations that can be conflictual, like our nervous systems activate. So if someone is already on the defense, or we are on the defense, like we're not going to get to a conversation that is productive. So things like asking permission, hey, can I tell you more about this issue that is really important to me? Chances are someone is not going to say no to that, if they're your friends, especially, versus you're wrong, let me tell you why. That already kind of shuts down the other person, and it's really hard to get in.
Yeah, I think also LinkedIn's really cool. If you don't have a LinkedIn, you should probably get a LinkedIn. It's just like social. It's a really cool tool. Yeah, and I think Hillary just said I like the idea of asking for permission, create space for respect. Yeah, I think informational interviews are like super cool. That's kind of like what we're doing right now with Cheryl Aguilar. So I think just like asking for permission can be super powerful, or even be like, hey, I really like found your profile LinkedIn, you're doing immigration, I'm really interested in that, can we have like a one-on-one conversation regarding that? So I think that's super cool. And some reason she she left, so there she is, she's come back. Okay, cool.
I
There you go.
push another button by error and I was out.
Oh my gosh, it's so funny. I'm glad you're back though. I'm glad you found your way back. Just technical difficulties. Sorry for everyone regarding that. But yeah, I think it's super powerful, like of networking. So thank you, Hillary, for bringing that up. Yeah, I guess if you had a scenario where like you were kind of like in crisis or like didn't really know or wasn't the expert in the room regarding a situation in immigration or things like that, what would you do within that scenario, and what would you like recommend people in the field who don't know what they're doing but they like have this responsibility to try to address it?
Mm-hmm. Like if you are in a meeting or something and you may not have information about something, or
Yeah, or even like I know you said like before, like when you had a student who was like suicidal ideation and like you weren't really an expert in the room about that. That's kind of what drove you to get your master's degree. So a similar situation like that, or even like in a professional setting, like with a meeting or even with a client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, and there's gonna be, we're not gonna know it all. I think that's a given. We're not gonna know it all, and I think it's really important to have that humility to know when we don't know it all, and then and that's why we built our network, because alone we cannot really do this work. We have to rely on other people that we know to do this work, and together we can do so much more. So I think it's okay to say, I don't know that information. I'm not the person who can help you. I actually don't have the skill set, but let me get you someone who can support you. That's also support. Even if you're not the one doing it yourself, that's also support. And I think it's definitely part of our code of ethics to operate from a place of competence. So being able, like, I knew that I couldn't help that youth because I didn't have the right training for it. I wasn't a social worker then, but I knew enough in my gut that I didn't have what it took to support that youth. And sometimes when you are in meetings, advocacy meetings or other meetings, people may come to, if you're an expert, people may come to you for the answer to something, and you may not know it. And I think it's okay. I think it's better to say, you know what, let me get you that information. If you don't want to say, I actually don't know it, but to say, I'm going to get you that information. Where can I email it? Or can we have a follow-up meeting? Then to try to pretend that you know something. I think also when we do that, we give others permission to do the same.
Yeah, it's really powerful. Yeah, I just think there's so much like shared knowledge being done in this session. So like also I put your organized research in this session just to make sure everyone got it from this portion.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And then I just kind of want to acknowledge like how immigration kind of varies state to state and like federally, and like I think during like the ICE raids and like not as progressive like policies has really affected immigration. And so it's kind of like it's kind of like a somber tone where it's like, how can we like act towards like immigration rights versus like how do we counsel people who had a traumatic experience crossing the border, whether it was legally or illegally, or not even legally, just like without the proper documentations, because no person is illegal. So, I think just even with that, like, what would be like some feedback you would get on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to your point about legality or documentation, we have a system that is completely broken. For a family to be able to come to United States, they need to, in quote unquote the legal way, and I say quote unquote because there's no legal way when your system is broken, and actually seeking asylum is legal. So many of the newcomers that we have in from different countries, whether it's Venezuela, whether it is Ukraine, whether it is Central America, are coming here to find asylum, which has been a legal right since the 60s. So that's already a legal right that is that our government is trying to take away for many families. So there's no system right now. I think what the system looks like right now is if someone wants to petition, like if I have a family member in the United States and they can petition for me, if I qualify to be petitioned by the family member, it can be a wait of up to 20 years in many cases in many countries. And that's if you're lucky to have someone to petition you. There's worker visas, but they're very limited worker visas, and they're kind of reserved for more high skilled jobs. So it's like there's very not enough opportunity for people to come, quote unquote, the legal way. So that's really important to know, because it changes a little bit about how we think about immigration. That's not necessarily what we hear on Fox News or in other media outlets. We don't hear those stories. We just hear the stories of people coming to take things away from us. So I think in just even working in immigration, just knowing what the stories are, knowing what the facts are, it's a great space. And it's going to take a lot of conversations for people to change their views and their minds about immigration. It's going to take a lot of that. But there's so many things that we can do. One thing will be to push for immigration reform at the federal level. There's a lot of piecemeal projects. There's TPS, there's the DREAM Act. There's many different things, and those are really helpful. And we also need to fight for comprehensive immigration reform that doesn't leave anyone behind. Locally, there's a lot that we can do. I would say start local. Start local, finding out what are some of the things that you can do locally. In DC, for instance, we have a lot of newcomers that are coming by buses. They're being sent by buses from Texas. And I think New York also had a wave of those new migrants, those asylum seekers. And they're literally being thrown, being bused to a new community and being left there without any connections to that community. So something that in DC, many communities members did is they banded together to kind of create a coalition of support for these families. So figuring out where is the need, and we're not going to be able to do it all. We're not going to be, I want to do it all. And my heart kind of breaks when I'm not able to kind of respond in a way that I envision, but I have friends who may have more time that I can send, hey, go to this rally, or a family member that I may say, hey, sign this petition. So let's think about it in terms of community. What is it that we can do? Sharing information in social media goes a long way. So you said LinkedIn, use your Facebook, whatever it is that you can do. And every little effort adds up.
Yeah, that's so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to acknowledge we're almost done with our session. So I guess, do you have any words of wisdom, takeaways? I did see the resources. It was super helpful, and like all the other stuff. So, whether it's like even like coalition with like some of the lawyers who do the more legal paperwork for immigration, or like networking, or what have you. What are some words of wisdoms or like final remarks? And if you could share your LinkedIn, that'd be really appreciated.
Yes. Oh, I have to go to my LinkedIn to get it because I don't have it. But I'll share with you my website that has my email. But you can find me on LinkedIn under Cheryl Aguilar, and my website is hopecenterforwellness.com.
Okay.
Hopecenterforwellness.com. I would say, this work can have an expiration date if we don't take care of ourselves. So I think about how I want to be in this field long term, and to be able to do that, caring for myself is like the number one priority. And that can be really tricky in the work that we do, because it's hard work. It's hard work, and it's work of the heart. It's work that we really care about and that we're passionate about. If we envision ourselves being in this field long term, self-care must be a part of what we do. Not as an add-on, but as a survival mechanism. This is, I typically say, as we eat, as we breathe for our survival, we must self-care. Knowing our limitations, but also knowing our strength, and operate it from a place of ethics. Being able to come to our code of ethics and do the work that we're trained to do in a way that honors our values and honors our ethics of the profession as well. So as you continue your education journey, make lots of connections, or make a few important connections. Don't shy away from opportunities, and know that you had a life, before you became a social worker. Your personal experience, your culture, your values, that all shapes how we are as professionals. So when you're ready to go into the job market, really connect to who you are inside to be able to paint a broad picture of what you will bring to the table as a social worker.
Amazing. Mic drop. Yeah, thank
Love
you
your
so much.
enthusiasm, Marissa.
It's been so helpful, so informative, so much wisdom. I can't thank you enough from the Chris people and also the students attending. So we do have like 5 minutes to spare. So if any last questions, you can ask. But if not, thank you for your time. You've been amazing. And yeah, just really grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm really grateful for you, Marisa, and for this group, because one thing I have learned during the pandemic is how we've all kind of experienced, whether directly or indirectly, loss. People that we care about, we've lost during the pandemic, whether relatives. I lost my father during the pandemic, and he, in my grief experience, had taught me so much. And one thing is to value time and really understand what I want to do with my time. So I want to thank you all for choosing the time to be here today, to grow, to network, and be better social workers and leaders than what you already are.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And yeah, amazing information I said in the chat. And hope everyone has a great day.
Yeah.
And make sure self-care and take care of yourself, like she said.
Absolutely. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.